Her cruel comment, a look of contempt, and a young woman determined not to give in. What began as an act of discrimination transformed into a movement that broke barriers, united generations, and showed the country that everyone has a place. Welcome to the channel. Before we start, like and subscribe so we can continue creating stories like this. The morning began like any other at Diamond Plaza, the most exclusive shopping center in Highland Park, Dallas, Texas. The restaurant area, always illuminated with natural light filtered through Italian-designed stained glass, began to fill with its usual visitors, mothers with small children in private school uniforms, distracted couples drinking coffee from fine porcelain cups, and well-dressed ladies with bags from expensive stores. Among them, a woman of refined appearance, hair perfectly pulled back in an elegant bun, dressed in a designer suit recognizable from miles away, entered the dining area as if she owned the place. Victoria Alden Morrison belonged to one of the most influential families in Dallas, or at least that's what she always proclaimed at charity gatherings, where she liked to boast about her trips to Europe and other parts of the United States. She was the type of person who expected to be served before anyone else, who complained about the noise children made, and who judged others with the sharp gaze of someone who considers themselves superior by birth. Victoria surveyed her surroundings, like someone analyzing newly discovered territory, until something caught her attention in an unpleasant way. At one of the central tables, a young woman with a visibly larger-than-average build was wearing simple but clean clothes, with headphones and an open book on the table. Victoria wrinkled her nose as if she had smelled something unpleasant, that gesture that American grandmothers would recognize as a look of disgust. She approached slowly, the sound of her designer heels resonating on the polished marble until stopping a few steps from the table. Without hesitating for a second, she turned to the nearest security guard and said in a firm tone, but educated enough to sound authoritative, "Excuse me, Mr. Security Guard, that girl over there, she's affecting the aesthetics of the environment. Could you ask her to leave?" James, the security guard with 10 years of experience at the shopping center, was surprised by the request. He had seen many strange things in his job, but never something so blatantly discriminatory. "Excuse me, ma'am, but the young lady isn't doing anything wrong," he responded professionally, though visibly uncomfortable. "I'm asking you, please," insisted Victoria, slightly raising her voice. "This is a high-level public place. Some people simply don't fit in with the environment. Do your job." The young woman, Sarah Westbrook, perceiving the movement around her, removed her headphones, not understanding the situation. She was concentrating on her social psychology book, preparing for an exam at the University of Texas at Dallas. James approached with visible discomfort, but before he could say anything, a firmer voice was heard from behind. "Is there a problem here?" It was an older woman, dressed discreetly in an impeccably cut pearl gray suit, without ostentatious jewelry, but with a posture that exuded natural authority. All the employees greeted her with respect, albeit discreetly. Eleanor Westbrook had built Diamond Plaza from scratch after inheriting a small plot of land from her late husband 20 years earlier. She was the founder and owner of the shopping center, known internally but rarely seen by visitors. Victoria, without recognizing who was speaking, responded with the same superior tone. "I'm just asking that you maintain the standard of the sa place. Some people don't understand that certain spaces aren't for everyone." Eleanor looked at her steadily, then turned to Sarah at the table and said naturally, "Honey, would you come with me for a moment?" Victoria was petrified. James tried to hide a smile. Sarah stood up unhurriedly and walked alongside her mother, leaving the woman who caused the confusion in complete silence, her face transforming from a haughty expression to one of absolute surprise. That would be just the first of many impacts that day. In the administrative office, decorated with sobriety but elegance, Sarah was still affected. It was the first day she had decided to study in the restaurant area, a space that her mother managed with such care, always saying that everyone would be welcome there. But that phrase "doesn't fit in with the environment" reverberated in her mind like a painful echo that reminded her of so many other similar situations in her life. "Mom, I don't want to cause problems," she finally said after a long silence. That lady is right. This place is... Eleanor raised her hand, interrupting her. Don't even think about finishing that sentence, Sarah. This place is exactly for people like you. Studious, respectful, educated. Your body doesn't define who you are or where you can be. The firmness in Eleanor's voice left no room for doubt. She had built that commercial empire after years of discrimination when she was a simple vendor in Southside, one of the most famous working-class markets in Dallas. Des, you want to go home? She asked afterward more softly. Sarah, with bright but determined eyes, shook her head. No, I want to stay. If I leave now, I'm giving her the reason. Meanwhile, in the dining area, Victoria began to notice uncomfortable looks around her. An administrative employee, Jason, who had witnessed everything, approached and discreetly handed her a note with the words, "Your conduct has been recorded. Diamond Plaza reserves the right not to tolerate discrimination of any form. You are invited to leave." She, perplexed, protested heatedly. "Do you know who I am? I'm Victoria Alden Morrison. My husband plays golf with the governor. I demand to speak with the manager right now." Jason, with the calmness of someone who has dealt with difficult customers for years, responded, "The order comes directly from the owner, ma'am. Mrs. Eleanor Westbrook does not tolerate this type of behavior in her establishment." The name resonated in Victoria's ears like a bell. Everyone in the high social circle of Dallas knew Eleanor Westbrook, the woman who had built a commercial empire starting almost from nothing, and whose Diamond Plaza shopping center was considered one of the most exclusive in the United States. And she had just insulted her daughter. Victoria paled, for the first time truly aware of the magnitude of her error. A few meters away, a young influencer, Zoe Sullivan, had discreetly recorded the entire scene with her phone. With her more than 1 million followers on social media, Zoe was already editing the video, adding comments about discrimination and fat phobia. Sarah didn't know it, but her experience was about to become the center of a media storm that would shake not only Diamond Plaza, but the entire American society accustomed to normalizing discrimination based on physical appearance. In her office, Eleanor looked out the window at the bustle of the shopping center. Memories came like waves, her own struggle when she was young and people judged her for her body. The doors that closed, the opportunities denied. She had built this place promising herself that it would be different, that it would be for everyone. And now her own daughter faced the same pain. She made a decision at that moment. This situation would not end here. Not while she was the owner of Diamond Plaza. Meanwhile, Victoria arrived at her home in River Oaks, one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in Dallas. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing. The video was already circulating and her face appeared clearly, along with hashtags like Lady Discrimination and I Out Victoria. Her perfect world was about to crumble, and she didn't even imagine that this was just the beginning. The real storm was just starting to form. Zoe Sullivan's video spread like wildfire in dry straw. In less than 3 hours, it had reached 2 million views, and the main television programs were already contacting the influencer to obtain exclusive statements. Victoria Alden Morrison had become, without intending to, the face of classism and discrimination in America. Sarah, for her part, returned to her table in the dining area, determined not to be defeated. She opened her book again, put on her headphones, but something had changed. People were looking at her, some with curiosity, others with a kind of newly discovered respect. An older lady timidly approached her table. "Excuse me, may I sit down?" she asked in a soft voice. Sarah nodded, surprised. The woman, who introduced herself as Mrs. Grace, told her that she had been coming to Diamond Plaza for years, always feeling observed because of her appearance. "Seeing how you stayed, how you didn't let yourself be intimidated, it gave me courage," she confessed, with eyes bright with contained emotion. Meanwhile, in the River Oaks mansion, Victoria faced her own crisis. Her husband, Edward Morrison, an important real estate businessman, had just arrived, furious after receiving dozens of calls from business partners. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" he shouted at her, showing her on his tablet the headlines that were already circulating. "Real estate mogul Morrison's wife stars in discrimination scandal. Classism at Diamond Plaza. when high society shows its worst face. Victoria tried to defend herself. "Edward, that girl shouldn't be there. That shopping center has a certain level and—" The businessman interrupted her abruptly. "That girl is Sarah Westbrook, Eleanor Westbrook's daughter. Do you have any idea how many businesses we have with the Westbrook Group? You just put million-dollar contracts at risk with your stupid discrimination." Reality hit Victoria hard. Not only had she committed a morally reprehensible act, she had also endangered her family's business empire. Edward left, slamming the door while she remained paralyzed, watching how her phone kept ringing incessantly, with social media notifications where friends and acquaintances publicly distanced themselves from her actions. At Diamond Plaza, the day went on with a different energy. The news had spread among the employees, and everyone wanted to show their support for Sarah. James, the guard who had tried to protect her, approached during his break. "Miss Westbrook, I wanted to apologize for not acting faster," he said with evident discomfort. Sarah smiled, moved by the man's sincerity. "You don't have to apologize, James. You did the right thing by not letting her intimidate you." "It's just that my older daughter Ashley has your same build," confessed the guard, "and every day she suffers teasing at school. That's why it hurt me so much to see how that lady treated you." The conversation took an unexpected turn when James mentioned that his 15-year-old daughter dreamed of being a fashion designer, but believed her body would prevent her from being accepted in that world. Sarah felt an immediate connection to the story. In the administrative office, Eleanor was receiving constant calls from media outlets. The situation had escalated beyond a simple incident. It was the perfect moment to take a firm stance. She gathered her marketing and public relations team. "I want us to launch an institutional campaign about diversity and inclusion," she ordered with determination, "and I want my daughter to be the face of that campaign." The marketing director, Sophia Roberts, blinked in surprise. "Are you sure, Mrs. Westbrook? Sarah has always been very reserved. She never wanted to appear at corporate events." "This time will be different," Eleanor responded with certainty, "because this time it's not about being the owner's daughter. It's about defending something we believe in." At that moment, Jason entered the office hurriedly. "Mrs. Westbrook, there's a situation. Mrs. Alden Morrison is at the main entrance demanding to see you. She says she's come to apologize." A tense silence took over the room. Eleanor breathed deeply. "Let her in. But I want Sarah to be present." Meanwhile, Sarah had exchanged phone numbers with James, promising to talk with his daughter Ashley, to encourage her to pursue her dreams. She was putting away her things when she received a message from her mother, asking her to come up urgently to the administrative office. When Sarah entered, she found an unexpected scene. Victoria Alden was sitting in front of her mother's desk, visibly uncomfortable and without the haughty air that had characterized her hours before. Upon seeing Sarah enter, Victoria automatically stood up. I want to offer my sincere apologies for my behavior," she began with a trembling voice. "I have no excuse for what I did." Eleanor observed the scene with an impassive expression. Sarah looked at the woman who hours before had publicly humiliated her. She could see the fear in her eyes, the concern about the media scandal and the possible economic repercussions. They weren't sincere apologies. They were apologies motivated by panic. "I accept your apologies," Sarah finally said, surprising both her mother and Victoria. "But not for me. I accept them for all the people who have ever felt excluded, judged, or belittled for their physical appearance and never received an apology." The response completely disarmed Victoria, who expected a reaction of anger or resentment. Eleanor smiled discreetly, proud of her daughter's maturity. "Mrs. Alden," intervened Eleanor, "I appreciate your visit, but you'll understand that a simple "I'm sorry" doesn't repair the damage caused. I propose something. Diamond Plaza is about to launch a campaign about inclusion and diversity. If you really want to make amends for your error, you could actively participate in it." Victoria paled. Participating in such a campaign would mean publicly admitting her error, exposing herself even more to public scrutiny. I would have to think about it," she stammered. "Of course," responded Eleanor with a neutral tone. "Meanwhile, I must inform you that the Westbrook Group is reconsidering its business relationships with Morrison Enterprises. My legal team will be in contact with your husband shortly." The veiled threat hung in the air. Victoria left the office, feeling how her privileged world was crumbling. Outside, several employees who had heard about her visit observed her coldly. The video kept circulating, now with millions of views, and her phone didn't stop receiving notifications of people canceling invitations to social events. That night, Sarah was having dinner with her mother in her penthouse overlooking the Dallas skyline. The apartment, decorated with pieces of contemporary American art, reflected Eleanor's sophisticated taste but close to her roots. "Why did you accept her apologies?" Eleanor finally asked, while serving 2 glasses of red wine. "We all know. They weren't sincere." Sarah smiled melancholically. "Because I needed to do it for myself, Mom. Carrying resentment would only harm Sami." Eleanor nodded, recognizing the wisdom in her daughter's words. "You've always been smarter than I was at your age," she confessed. Sarah's phone rang, interrupting the moment. It was an unknown number. Upon answering, she heard the voice of an older man. "Sarah, it's me, your Uncle Frank. I don't know if you remember me." The young woman almost dropped the phone in shock. Frank Westbrook, her mother's younger brother, had cut ties with the family more than 10 years ago after a strong argument with Eleanor. Sarah barely remembered him from her childhood. "I saw what happened at the shopping center. That video," continued Frank. "It reminded me so much of what I myself experienced. I wanted to tell you that I'm proud of how you handled the situation." Eleanor, seeing her daughter's expression, asked who was calling. When Sarah silently articulated Uncle Frank, Eleanor's expression completely changed. Years of resentment, wounded pride and unspoken words seemed to weigh on her shoulders. Could I speak with your mother?" Frank finally asked. Sarah, with her heart beating rapidly, extended the phone to Eleanor. What began as a horrible incident of discrimination was triggering unexpected consequences, reuniting a family separated by years of silence. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Victoria faced the fury of her husband, who had just received notification that 3 important contracts with the Westbrook Group were suspended until further notice. "Are you satisfied?" shouted Edward, throwing documents on the table. "Years of work ruined by your stupid classist attitude." Victoria, for the first time in her life, had no defenses. Sitting in her luxurious dining room, surrounded by expensive objects and privileges she had always taken for granted, she began to feel the real weight of her actions. Her phone rang. It was her best friend, Melissa, calling to tell her that they preferred she not attend the exclusive charity event of the weekend. "It's just that, with all this scandal, Victoria, you'll understand that your presence could distract from the charitable cause." That night, 2 women in different parts of Dallas faced opposite realities. Sarah discovered a new sense of purpose born from pain, while Victoria experienced for the first time the social rejection that she had so often inflicted on others. And this was just the beginning of a transformation that neither of them could imagine. A week after the incident, Diamond Plaza had subtly changed. The same exclusive stores were still there. The same gourmet restaurants continued serving sophisticated dishes, but something in the atmosphere was different. For the first time, people of all physical types walked through its corridors without feeling judging looks. The message had been clear. At Diamond Plaza, everyone was welcome. Sarah had become, without intending to, a symbol. Although she had rejected interviews with the main media outlets, a post on her social media had resonated deeply. "Belonging doesn't depend on your body, but on who you are. I belong. You belong. We all belong." The message, accompanied by a photo of herself at the same table where she had been discriminated against, had been shared more than 50,000 times. The shopping center administration, following Eleanor's vision, had officially initiated the We All Belong campaign, with discreet but powerful posters at all entrances. The staff had received special training on inclusion and handling discrimination situations. But the deepest change was happening in interpersonal relationships. Eleanor and Frank, after 10 years of estrangement, had agreed to meet at Eleanor's apartment. Sarah was extremely nervous preparing snacks for the meeting. "You don't have to try so hard," said Eleanor, watching her daughter run from one side of the kitchen to the other. "It's just Frank. He's your brother, Mom, my uncle, part of our family that has been absent for too long," responded Sarah, arranging the artisanal cheese tray for the third time. The doorbell rang and both women exchanged tense looks before Eleanor went to open it. Frank Westbrook, a man in his 50s with a robust build similar to Sarah's, timidly entered the apartment. Unlike his sister, he didn't wear designer clothes or carry expensive accessories. His simplicity contrasted with the understated luxury of Eleanor's penthouse. "Hello, Ellie," he said, using the childhood nickname that no one else dared to use, with the powerful businesswoman. Eleanor, normally so firm and contained, felt a lump in her throat. "Frank," she responded, trying to maintain her composure. "Thank you for coming." The first few minutes were uncomfortable, with superficial conversations about the weather and the view from the apartment. Sarah observed her mother and her uncle, looking for the similarities that time and resentment could not erase. The same gesture when smiling, the same way of slightly inclining the head when listening attentively. Finally, Frank broke the tension. "I saw what happened with Sarah at Diamond Plaza." Eleanor nodded. "It was terrible, but it was also necessary in some way. It reminded me of us, Ellie, of how people treated us when we were young, when we lived in Southside and dreamed of something better." The mention of the working-class neighborhood where they had grown up changed something in the atmosphere. Sarah, who only knew fragments of the family history, moved closer, intrigued. "The difference is that you built all this," continued Frank, making a gesture that encompassed the luxurious apartment. "I remained the chubby guy from the neighborhood, the one who never fit in elegant places." There was pain in his voice, an old pain that Sarah instantly recognized because it was the same she had felt so many times. "That's not true, Frank," intervened Eleanor, with more emotion than she usually showed. "You chose to stay in Southside to help the community. I was the one who walked away, the one who wanted to forget where I came from." The words floated in the air, loaded with truths unspoken for years. "When we argued that time," began Frank. "When I told you that you were ashamed of me, of our family," completed Eleanor. "It wasn't true. I was scared. I had built this image of a successful businesswoman, and I feared that if people saw where I really came from, they would judge you," finished Frank, "like they judged Sarah." Something changed at that moment. Decades of resentment began to dissolve as the Westbrook siblings reconnected with their shared history, growing up in a humble neighborhood, suffering discrimination for their physical appearance, taking different paths in adult life. Sarah listened, fascinated, discovering parts of her family history she had never known. "When I saw that video, I saw my niece facing exactly the same thing we faced," said Frank. "But she didn't let herself be intimidated, and I thought, if she can be so brave, maybe I can be too. Maybe it's time to let go of the past." Eleanor, the formidable businesswoman who never showed weakness, let a tear escape. Sarah had never seen her mother cry. "I've missed you so much, brother," confessed Eleanor, taking Frank's hand. "Every achievement, every new project, I always thought, what would Frank say about this?" The family reunion that began with tension transformed into a moment of healing. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Victoria Alden faced a very different situation. Her house, normally full of friends having coffee and sharing gossip about high society, was empty. Her phone, previously constantly ringing with invitations to exclusive events, remained silent. Edward had traveled to Austin, supposedly for business, but Victoria suspected it was to avoid the scandal in Dallas. For the first time in her privileged life, Victoria experienced social rejection. Sitting in her luxurious dining room, completely alone, she reviewed the news on her tablet. The scandal was still a topic of conversation, now amplified by the launch of the We All Belong campaign at Diamond Plaza. Sarah's image appeared in several articles, always with that serene smile that deeply irritated Victoria. How could she be so calm after everything that had happened? The doorbell rang, interrupting her thoughts. Victoria was startled. She wasn't expecting visitors. Upon opening the door, she found Melissa, her supposed best friend, the same one who had uninvited her from the charity event. "What are you doing here?" asked Victoria, not bothering to hide her resentment. Melissa entered without waiting for an invitation. "I've come to help you, even though you don't deserve it," she responded dryly. "Edward called me. He's worried about you." "Edward called? Are you?" The surprise in Victoria's voice was genuine. "Yes. He says you've been locked up for days, that you barely eat, that you don't answer his calls." Victoria collapsed onto the sofa. It was true. Since the scandal, she had entered a kind of spiral of self-pity. "And what does he expect me to do? My life is ruined. Everyone hates me." Melissa sighed, exasperated. "For God's sake, Victoria, don't be so dramatic. Your life isn't ruined. You've made a horrible mistake, yes, but it's not the end of the world." "Isn't it? The wives of Edward's partners cancelled the charity lunch I organize every year. The board of directors at the club suggested I take a break from my activities there. Even my stylist cancelled my weekly appointment." Melissa looked at her fixedly. "Do you realize how ridiculous all that sounds? There are people facing real problems in this city, and you're lamenting because your stylist cancelled an appointment." The words hit Victoria with unexpected force. "What do you want me to do then?" she asked defensively. "I want you to get up from that sofa, get yourself together, and—" "Come with me," responded Melissa, heading to Victoria's closet. "Where to?" "To Diamond Plaza." Victoria paled. "Are you crazy? I can't show myself there. People will recognize me, they'll point at me, they'll probably throw me out." "Exactly," interrupted Melissa. "That's exactly what you fear will happen. That's exactly what you made that girl feel." The silence that followed was revealing. For the first time, Victoria was beginning to understand the magnitude of her actions, not from the perspective of how they affected her, but how they had affected Sarah. Meanwhile, at the shopping center, Sarah had an unexpected meeting. James, the security guard, had brought his daughter Ashley as promised. The teenager, visibly nervous, could barely look Sarah in the eyes. "It's an honor to meet you," she murmured, playing with the edge of her blouse. "My dad says you want to be a designer," responded Sarah warmly, trying to make the young woman feel comfortable. Ashley nodded timidly. "But I don't think I can, with my body." Sarah smiled understandingly. "Do you know that some of the most innovative designers today have bodies like ours? Let me show you something." She took out her tablet and began to show her profiles of plus-size designers who were revolutionizing the fashion industry in America. "The problem has never been our body, Ashley. The problem is an industry that refuses to recognize diversity. But that's changing, and people like you are leading that change." The teenager's eyes lit up as Sarah showed her fashion shows, collections, and designs created by people with diverse bodies. For the first time, Ashley could visualize herself in that world she loved so much. "I have a proposal for you," Sarah finally said. "Diamond Plaza is organizing a fashion show for the We All Belong campaign. We need emerging designers with fresh visions. Would you be interested in presenting some sketches?" Ashley's expression was all the answer Sarah needed. In another part of the shopping center, Eleanor and Frank toured the facilities, remembering how the land had been before the construction of Diamond Plaza. "I remember when you bought this land," commented Frank. "Everyone thought you were crazy, that it was too big, too ambitious for a woman alone." Eleanor smiled, nostalgic. "You were the only one who supported me at the beginning, before our fight. You know? I never stopped following your achievements, Ellie. Every inauguration, every expansion. I was always proud, even if I couldn't tell you." They stopped in front of the central fountain, the work of a famous American sculptor, which represented diverse human figures holding up the world. "This fountain was always my favorite," commented Frank, "because it shows what you always wanted to create, a space where everyone would be valued." Eleanor nodded, moved by her brother's observation. "The We All Belong campaign isn't something new, Frank. It's what I always wanted for Diamond Plaza. What happened with Sarah simply reminded me that it's not enough to desire it. We have to actively work to create that environment. At that moment, Sophia Roberts, the marketing director, approached hurriedly. "Mrs. Westbrook, excuse the interruption. There's something you should see immediately." Her urgent tone alerted the Westbrook siblings. "What's happening?" "Victoria Alden is here in the shopping center, with a friend. The security cameras captured them entering 10 minutes ago." Eleanor frowned. "Did she come to cause more problems?" "I don't know, but I thought you should know, especially because Sarah is also here, with James's daughter." The tension was palpable. What was Victoria Alden Morrison looking for by returning to the place where she had starred in the biggest scandal of her life? Was it a provocation, a desperate attempt to clean her image, or was something deeper happening? What none of them knew was that Victoria had made a transcendental decision that morning, a decision that would change the course of several lives, including her own. And she was about to cross paths with Sarah Westbrook again, this time in completely different circumstances. Victoria advanced through the corridors of Diamond Plaza as if crossing a minefield. Each step was cautious. Each look around her was loaded with apprehension. At her side, Melissa maintained a firm attitude, almost pushing her when Victoria showed signs of wanting to turn around and flee. "I can't believe you convinced me to do this," murmured Victoria, nervously adjusting the sunglasses she wore as a weak disguise. "It was either this or staying locked in your house forever," responded Melissa dryly. "Besides, you have to face the consequences of your actions at some point." Around her, some visitors to the shopping center looked at her with curiosity. Despite the dark glasses and the scarf on her head, there was something recognizable about Victoria, something that made people stop and whisper. The video had been seen by millions of people. Her face had become the symbol of elegant discrimination, of blatant classism. "I think they're recognizing me," she whispered, terrified. "Of course they're recognizing you," responded Melissa. "You're the most hated woman in Dallas this week. What did you expect?" A group of teenagers passed by them, discreetly pointing. One of the girls took out her phone, evidently to take a photo. Victoria quickened her pace, seeking refuge. "I can't do this, Melissa. It was a mistake to come." "The mistake was what you did last week," responded her friend impassively. "This is simply facing the reality you created." They stopped in front of the same restaurant area where the incident had occurred. Victoria saw with surprise that there was much more diversity among the customers. People of all sizes and appearances enjoyed the food without apparent discomfort. And then she saw her. Sarah Westbrook was sitting at a nearby table, animatedly conversing with a teenager. Victoria felt the air leave her lungs. "She's there," she murmured, paralyzed. "I know," responded Melissa. "It's your opportunity." "My opportunity for what?" "To apologize sincerely, not out of fear of economic or social repercussions, but because you truly understand the harm you caused." Victoria swallowed. The idea of facing Sarah again, now in public, terrified her. But a part of her, a part that had been reflecting deeply during her social ostracism, recognized the need for this moment. While she hesitated, she saw Eleanor Westbrook quickly approach her daughter's table, accompanied by a stocky man Victoria didn't recognize and a woman from the administrative team. They were alerting Sarah about something, or someone, about her. "They're seeing me," whispered Victoria, terrified. "Let's go, please." But it was too late. The group at Sarah's table was looking directly at them. Victoria saw how Eleanor said something to her daughter, how the young woman slowly turned until their gazes met across the space that separated them. The moment of truth had arrived. At the table, Sarah had momentarily frozen upon seeing Victoria. The presence of the woman who had publicly humiliated her brought back a wave of emotions. But something was different. Victoria didn't have the same haughty posture, the same expression of superiority. She seemed small, frightened. "It's her," confirmed Eleanor with evident tension in her voice. "Do you want me to call security?" Sarah observed Victoria for a few seconds, noting her evident discomfort, the way she shrank from the gazes of the other customers. "No," she finally responded. "Let her be." Frank looked at his niece with admiration. "Are you sure, Sarah? After what she did to you?" Sarah nodded slowly. "If we throw her out, we'll only reinforce the cycle. Someone has to break it." Ashley, James's daughter, observed the scene with fascination. For the teenager, who had endured teasing all her life for her weight, it was a powerful lesson about dignity and strength. "We could invite her to sit with us," suggested Sarah, surprising everyone at the table. Eleanor looked at her with disbelief. "Are you serious? After how she treated you?" "Precisely because of that, Mom. Because if I can sit with her after what she did, I'm demonstrating that I'm stronger than her prejudice." The determination in Sarah's voice left no room for discussion. Eleanor nodded slowly, recognizing the wisdom in her daughter's words. Sarah stood up, and before the astonished gaze of dozens of diners who were beginning to recognize the protagonists of the viral video, walked directly toward Victoria. "Mrs. Alden," she said calmly when she arrived in front of her, "welcome back to Diamond Plaza." Victoria was momentarily speechless. She had rehearsed 1,000 times what she would say if she saw Sarah again, but all her carefully prepared phrases evaporated before the young woman's serene dignity. I came to," she stammered. "To apologize properly," completed Melissa, giving her a slight push. "Yes," confirmed Victoria, recovering part of her composure. "I want to offer a sincere apology, not like the previous time. A real apology for the harm I caused." Sarah observed her in silence, evaluating the sincerity of her words. Around her, several customers had taken out their phones, evidently recording the encounter. This would undoubtedly be the second act of a drama that all of Dallas was following. "Would you like to join us?" Sarah finally asked, pointing to her table where Eleanor, Frank, and Ashley observed the scene with different degrees of amazement. The invitation took Victoria completely by surprise. "You're inviting me to sit with you after what I did?" "Precisely because of that," responded Sarah calmly. "Because everyone deserves a second chance, even you." The words resonated deeply in Victoria. For the first time since the incident, she felt something different from fear or self-pity. She felt real shame for her actions, not for the consequences they had had on her life. With trembling legs, she followed Sarah to the table. Eleanor Westbrook received her with a neutral expression, professional but distant. Frank, whom Victoria didn't know, looked at her with curiosity more than hostility. And the teenager, Ashley, observed her with a mixture of fascination and caution. "Mrs. Westbrook," began Victoria, addressing Eleanor, "I want to apologize not only to your daughter, but to you and your entire establishment for my unacceptable behavior." Eleanor nodded slightly without offering immediate absolution. "What brings you back to Diamond Plaza, Mrs. Alden? Genuine remorse or the desire to recover your social status?" The direct question was typical of Eleanor Westbrook, known in the business world for her frankness. Victoria breathed deeply before responding. "At first it was fear. Fear of losing my social position, of the economic consequences for my husband's businesses. But these days of isolation have made me reflect. I've remembered things I had buried." The sincerity in her voice surprised even Melissa, who had known her for decades. "What kind of things?" asked Sarah, genuinely interested. Victoria looked around, aware of the people who were observing, of the phones that were probably still recording, but she no longer cared. It was time for the truth. "I too was judged for my appearance many years ago," she confessed with a barely audible voice. "Before the cosmetic surgeries, before the treatments, before marrying Edward and entering high society. I came from a lower middle-class family in Westlake. My body wasn't like that of the rich girls I studied with at university thanks to a scholarship." The revelation caused absolute silence at the table. No one expected this confession from the elegant Victoria Alden, famous for her disdain toward those she considered inferior. "I promised myself that no one would ever make me feel less again, and to make sure, I became exactly the type of person who had hurt me. I transformed into the aggressor to never again be the victim." Genuine tears rolled down her cheeks as she spoke. They weren't tears of self-pity, but of recognition, of facing a deeply buried truth. When I saw you, she continued, looking directly at Sarah, so comfortable, so self-assured, despite not fitting into the standards that I had worked so hard to achieve, something in me broke, an ugly and frightened part that has been controlling my life without me recognizing it. Frank, who had remained silent, finally intervened. Fear makes us commit terrible mistakes. Fear of not being accepted, of being judged. I know from personal experience. Victoria looked at him, noting for the first time the physical similarity between him and Sarah. You are Frank Westbrook, Eleanor's brother, Sarah's uncle, he introduced himself, and someone who perfectly understands what it's like to be judged by your appearance. The conversation then took an unexpected turn. What began as a confrontation transformed into a sincere dialogue about insecurities, prejudices, and the painful path towards self-acceptance. Ashley, initially shy, shared her own experiences of bullying at school. Melissa spoke of the impossible standards that high society imposed on women. Even Eleanor, always reserved, briefly mentioned the obstacles she faced as a woman of humble origin trying to make her place in the business world. Around them, phones continued recording, capturing a moment of shared vulnerability and brutal honesty that was rarely seen in public. Sophia Roberts, who was observing from nearby, had an epiphany. She approached the table with an unexpected proposal. Mrs. Eldon, would you consider participating in our We All Belong campaign? Not as a central image, but as part of a panel on personal transformation and confronting prejudices. The proposal left Victoria speechless. From viral villain to participant in an inclusion campaign, it was a turn that she wouldn't have imagined, even in her strangest dreams. It would be an honor, she finally responded with a trembling voice, but I would perfectly understand if the Westbrook family prefers to keep their distance from me. Eleanor and Sarah exchanged a significant look. Finally, Eleanor spoke. The campaign is precisely about belonging, about second chances, about growth. It would be incongruent to exclude you if you're genuinely remorseful and willing to share your experience. And so, in the middle of a restaurant, area that days earlier had been the scene of discrimination, an unexpected project was born. Victoria Alden, the woman who had personified classism and discrimination, now became a testimony of transformation and openness. The video of this conversation began to circulate rapidly, complementing the previous one. If the first had shown the worst of American society, this showed its capacity for reconciliation and evolution. That night, in the Westbrook penthouse, Sarah, Eleanor, and Frank reflected on the day's events. I still can't believe you invited Victoria to sit with us, commented Eleanor, serving jasmine tea in fine porcelain cups. Neither can I, confessed Sarah. It was an impulse, but I felt it was the right thing at that moment. It was more than right, intervened Frank. It was necessary for her, for you, for everyone who was watching. Outside, the lights of Dallas shone intensely, creating a spectacular backdrop for an intimate conversation about forgiveness and second chances. Do you think she's really changed? Asked Eleanor, always the most skeptical. I don't know, responded Sarah honestly, but I think she's beginning to change, and sometimes the beginning is the most difficult part. Sarah's phone rang, interrupting the moment. It was a message from Ashley, proudly sending her first sketches for the fashion show. The images showed inclusive designs, made for all types of bodies, with a fresh and urban style that perfectly reflected the spirit of the new Diamond Plaza. Look at this, said Sarah, showing the designs to her mother and uncle. This girl has incredible talent. We should formally include her in the campaign team, suggested Eleanor, impressed by the creativity of the designs. With a contract and everything. Are you serious, Mom? Asked Sarah, surprised by the proposal. Totally serious, Diamond. Plaza needs young voices, fresh perspectives, and who better than someone who understands firsthand the importance of inclusion? Frank observed his sister with admiration. The Eleanor he remembered from years ago would never have considered hiring an inexperienced teenager for a project of such magnitude. "You've changed, Ellie," he commented with a smile. "We've all changed," she responded, returning the smile. "And that's precisely what we're celebrating, isn't it?" At that moment, an email arrived on Eleanor's phone. It was from Edward Morrison, Victoria's husband. The subject simply said, "Collaboration Proposal." The content was brief but clear. Morrison Enterprises was interested in becoming one of the main sponsors of the We All Belong campaign, providing a significant budget to expand its reach beyond Diamond Plaza, taking it to schools and universities throughout the city. "It seems Victoria wasn't the only one impacted by what happened," commented Eleanor, showing the email to Sarah and Frank. "Edward Morrison has a reputation as a ruthless businessman. For him to make a proposal like this, perhaps Victoria talked to him about our conversation," suggested Sarah. "Or perhaps he too is beginning to see things differently," added Frank. What had begun as a horrible incident of discrimination was generating waves of change that expanded far beyond Diamond Plaza. And at the center of that transformation was Sarah, a young woman who had turned a moment of humiliation into an opportunity to grow and help others grow. The next day, the We All Belong campaign would officially begin with a discussion panel where Victoria would publicly share her story of transformation. Ashley would present her designs for the upcoming fashion show, and Sarah, the young woman who had never sought the spotlight, would find herself at the center of a movement that was beginning to transform the way American society viewed body diversity. But that's a story that was about to be written, a new chapter that would be born from the reconciliation and forgiveness demonstrated that day in the restaurant area of Diamond Plaza. 3 months later, Diamond Plaza looked completely transformed. Not in its physical structure, which remained as elegant and sophisticated as ever, but in its essence, in the energy that flowed through its corridors. The We All Belong campaign had transcended initial expectations, becoming a social movement that resonated throughout Dallas and beyond. The inaugural panel, where Victoria had publicly shared her story of transformation, had gone viral with more than 10 million views. Her vulnerability in speaking about her own insecurities, about how she had built a shell of apparent superiority to protect herself from rejection, had touched sensitive fibers in thousands of people who identified with her experience from both sides of the spectrum, those who had been discriminated against and those who, out of fear or insecurity, had discriminated against others. Sarah observed the final preparations for the grand fashion show that would close the first stage of the campaign. On the main stage of the central atrium, technicians adjusted the lights while models of all sizes, ages, and complexions performed the last rehearsals. Among them, Ashley stood out, who had not only designed part of the collection, but had also been convinced by Sarah to model one of her own designs. "I'm so nervous I think I'm going to throw up," confessed the teenager, approaching Sarah with trembling hands. Sarah smiled understandingly. "It's normal to feel nervous. It means you care. What if I trip? What if people laugh?" The insecurity in Ashley's voice was palpable. "If you trip, you get up and continue forward. And if someone laughs, which I highly doubt, it's because they have their own problems to solve," responded Sarah calmly. "But honestly, Ash, all they'll see is your talent and your beauty." On the other side of the atrium, Victoria Alden personally supervised the decoration of the VIP area. These months had brought profound changes to her life. After her participation in the panel, she had begun to receive messages from women throughout the city who identified with her story of personal transformation. Almost without realizing it, she had become a kind of spokesperson for those seeking to free themselves from toxic beauty standards. Her marriage to Edward had also evolved. The crisis provoked by the initial incident had forced the couple to face uncomfortable truths about their relationship, about the superficial values that had sustained it for years. Now they worked together in the foundation they had created to promote inclusion in corporate spaces. "Victoria, the special guests will start arriving in half an hour," announced Sophia Roberts, approaching with a tablet showing the detailed program of the event. "The media are already installed in the designated area." Victoria nodded, still surprised by the ease with which she had gone from viral villain to respected collaborator in the project. It hadn't been an easy road. Many, still doubted the sincerity of her transformation, accusing her of opportunism or seeking to clean her public image. But time and the consistency of her actions were beginning to change those perceptions. In the administrative office, Eleanor and Frank finalized the details of the big surprise they would announce that night. After months of careful planning, the Westbrook Group would officially launch the Westbrook Foundation for Social Inclusion, with an ambitious scholarship program for young people from marginalized communities interested in design, architecture, and business development. "I never imagined that incident would bring us here," commented Eleanor, signing the last legal documents. "It was as if the universe gave us exactly what we needed at the precise moment." Frank nodded, thoughtful. "Do you remember when we were children in Southside and dreamed of changing the world?" Eleanor smiled at the memory. "You wanted to open a school for street children. And you wanted to build buildings where everyone could feel welcome," completed. "Frank, I guess in some way we're both fulfilling those childhood dreams." The fashion show was scheduled to begin at sunset. As the sun descended, Diamond Plaza illuminated with thousands of strategically placed lights to create a magical atmosphere. The VIP zone quickly filled with celebrities, business people, and public figures who months earlier would have avoided associating with a campaign about body diversity for fear of controversy. Now being part of We All Belong was a source of pride and social prestige. Among the special guests was Zoe Sullivan, the influencer who had recorded the original video. Her social media channel had evolved in these months, moving from purely aesthetic content to substantial conversations about inclusion and self-acceptance. James was also present, no longer as a security guard, but as a guest of honor, along with his entire family. His support for Sarah during the initial incident had earned him a promotion to security supervisor, and now he coordinated training on handling discrimination situations for all staff. The most anticipated moment arrived when the lights dimmed, and Sarah's voice resonated through the speakers, giving the official start to the fashion show. Despite multiple offers for her to be the main presenter, she had insisted on staying behind the scenes, allowing the event to focus on the message, not on her. "Welcome to the culmination of the first stage of our We All Belong campaign," she began. 3 months ago, a painful incident in this same shopping center reminded us that despite our advances as a society, discrimination remains present in our daily spaces. The giant screen showed images of the key moments of the campaign, the inaugural panel, the workshops in schools, the artistic interventions at different points in the city. But that incident also taught us something extraordinary. That change is possible when we are willing to honestly look at our prejudices, when we find the courage to recognize our mistakes, and when we offer and accept second chances. The first model appeared on the runway, a middle-aged woman with a robust body who walked with a confidence that drew spontaneous applause. She was followed by people of all ages, sizes, and complexions, each representing a different story of self-acceptance and empowerment. When Ashley's turn came, there was a moment of tension. The teenager, paralyzed by fear, remained motionless at the entry point to the runway. The lights illuminated her, but her feet seemed nailed to the floor. From her position, Sarah noticed what was happening and did something unexpected. She came out from behind the stage and approached Ashley. "Can I accompany you?" she asked softly. The relief in the young designer's eyes was immediate. And so together, Sarah and Ashley walked the runway, provoking the most prolonged ovation of the night. It was a powerful image. The woman who had been publicly discriminated against now, leading by example, supporting a new generation so they wouldn't have to face the same obstacles. From her seat in the front row, Victoria observed the scene with tears in her eyes. Her gaze briefly crossed with Sarah's, and in that silent exchange, there was a mutual recognition of the path traveled, from antagonists to collaborators in a project that was impacting thousands of lives. The fashion show concluded with all the models and designers gathered on the stage, while Eleanor Westbrook came up to make the official announcement of the foundation. When she mentioned that the first scholarship program would bear the name of Sarah Westbrook, the ovation was deafening. Sarah, visibly moved, embraced her mother in front of everyone, a gesture of vulnerability and authenticity that radically contrasted with the polished and distant image that American high society usually projected. The celebration following, the fashion show extended into the late hours of the night. At one point, Sarah found herself in a quiet corner of the cocktail party with Victoria, both observing the bustle from a certain distance. If someone had told me 3 months ago that we would be here, celebrating together, I would have thought, "They were crazy," commented Victoria with the honesty that had become characteristic of her. Sarah smiled. "Life has strange ways of teaching us what we need to learn." "I want you to know something," continued Victoria with a slightly trembling voice. "I will never be able to fully compensate for the pain I caused you that day. But I want you to know that it changed my life in ways I never imagined. It forced me to face truths about myself that I had been avoiding for decades." "It wasn't just about us," responded Sarah thoughtfully. "It was about something much bigger than you or me. We were simply the catalysts for a conversation that our society needed to have." At that moment, Ashley approached, radiant with happiness after her success on the runway. "Sarah, the people from Vogue America want to interview me. Me, can you believe it?" The teenager's genuine joy was contagious. Victoria observed the interaction between Sarah and Ashley, noting the natural way in which Sarah assumed the role of mentor, guiding the young designer without overshadowing her. It was a type of leadership she had rarely seen in the elitist circles where she had spent most of her adult life. "You should go with her," she suggested to Sarah. "It's your night too." "Actually, it's the night of all of us," responded Sarah. "Of all who have learned something, changed something, grown a little in these months." The We All Belong campaign would continue expanding in the following months, reaching schools, universities, and community centers throughout the United States. The incident that had begun as a moment of painful discrimination had transformed into the catalyst for a national movement for inclusion and respect for diversity. But beyond the social impact, the deepest transformations had occurred at a personal level. Sarah, who had always been reserved and preferred to remain in the background, had discovered her voice and her capacity to inspire others. Eleanor and Frank had healed old family wounds, joining forces to resume together the dreams of their childhood. And Victoria had undertaken the difficult journey from blind privilege toward conscious empathy, finding in the process an authenticity that no social position could have provided her. That night, as Dallas shone under a starry sky, Diamond Plaza sparkled with a different light. It was no longer simply an exclusive shopping center. It had become a symbol of transformation, a space where everyone truly belonged. And it had all begun with a moment of pain, followed by the courage of a young woman who decided not to be defeated, of a mother who firmly defended her values, and of a woman who found the courage to change. Because in the end, as Sarah had learned, belonging doesn't depend on your body but on who you are. And everyone, absolutely everyone, deserved that sense of belonging. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Sarah and Victoria has moved you and invites you to reflect on the power of personal transformation and inclusion. To continue this emotional journey, we have prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. Find it here by clicking on your left. If you liked this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like the video. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life and the power of positive change. Don't miss our upcoming content, where we will continue exploring themes that touch us all as a society. We'll be waiting for you in the comments to share your reflections on this story of redemption and second chances.